If you were a 90s kid like me, then there is little more representative of our teenage years than time spent with friends or significant others in a Blockbuster. You probably remember exactly where it was, what the layout was, what the snacks were, where the new releases were, the whole bit. Hell, I can see myself wandering around the Blockbuster in my hometown, arguing with my friends over what movie we were going to watch that night. Of course, Blockbusters are all gone now. The company bit the dust years ago and became the cautionary business tale that everyone talks about. After all, Blockbuster refused to innovate. They couldn't keep up with Netflix's on-demand video rental model, they failed to move into streaming, they failed to change their business practices, blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. If that's what you think, then you almost understand what happened to Blockbuster. But you don't completely understand. This interpretation of Blockbuster's demise is incomplete. Now, yes, Netflix contributed to Blockbuster's downfall. But the idea that Netflix killed Blockbuster is a huge, huge oversimplification. Netflix didn't kill Blockbuster. Blockbuster killed itself. How? Let's take a look. Here are 4 ways that Blockbuster died that had nothing to do with Netflix. First, and maybe most important, there's this. Blockbuster had a monstrous debt load. Now, before we go too deep into this, let's talk about the company itself for a second. The first Blockbuster was opened in 1985 by a man named David Cook. The store opened in Dallas and was known for its unique big block blue and yellow letter design and deep knowledge of movies. The VCR and home movie industry was just starting to take off at the time, and Cook was smart enough to get in on the ground floor. Blockbuster was extremely successful and began to expand quickly. It was bought in 1987 by a man named Wayne Huizenga, who successfully used a franchise model to wildly increase the company's growth. The challenge? Even in the early 1990s, Huizenga saw the writing on the wall. There were threats posed to the video rental industry by video on demand and rising at-home movie and cable systems. Fearful of those challenges and changes in technology, Huizenga investigated alternative entertainment systems, considering buying a cable company and even opening a Blockbuster theme park. The late fee carousel probably wasn't very popular. When those failed, Huizenga sold, and that leads us to problem number 1. Blockbuster was purchased by the entertainment giant Viacom in 1994. Viacom would eventually spin Blockbuster off into its own company. That happened in 2004, but this caused a massive financial problem for Blockbuster. As part of that deal, the company had to pay a $5 per share dividend. This was not a small number, and it was fatal. Blockbuster could never generate the revenue necessary to pay off that dividend. As a result, it had $1 billion in debt in its 2010 bankruptcy filings. This leads us to problem number 2. Activist investors and Carl Icahn. When you think of Blockbuster, you probably think of incompetent leadership, right? Yeah, sorta, but that's not the entire picture. In 1997, John Antioco became the new CEO of Blockbuster. This was towards the start of the Viacom era, so Antioco knew what he was getting himself into. Here's the thing. Antioco was good. Really good. He saw the threats coming from alternative forms of media, including video on demand. As early as 2000, Antioco began to partner with companies like Enron, yes, Enron, to form a new video on demand service. Keep in mind, this was 7 years before Netflix began to explore streaming options. In fact, it was this year that Blockbuster infamously turned down a chance to buy Netflix. Antioco had a lot of ideas that would prove to be future-oriented, and pushed corporate policies that, with time, would be viewed as the right idea. 2, in particular, would have changed the direction of Blockbuster. In 2004, Blockbuster launched an online service called, Blockbuster Online. This service operated similarly to early Netflix. Customers could order a DVD and have it mailed to them. This, combined with store returns, was a great idea, and an improvement on the traditional Blockbuster business model. Second, late fees. We're going to talk more about this in a little bit, but Antioco wanted to get rid of late fees. You remember late fees, right? Blockbuster would charge you if you returned your movie late. It was a huge profit generator for the company, but a monstrous pain for customers. At its peak, late fees generated $800 million, which once equaled 16% of Blockbuster's overall profit margin. In the face of rising competition, Antioco knew what a problem late fees presented, so he got rid of them. In 2005, Blockbuster got rid of late fees completely and began its No More Late Fees campaign. This cut off a massive profit center for the company. It also led to a false advertising lawsuit because people would still be charged the price of a full movie if they were more than 8 days late, but that's a very, very different video. So what was the problem? Well, Antioco's ideas ran afoul of Carl Icahn, who purchased about 10% of the company in 2005. For those of you who aren't familiar, Icahn is a famous investor and one of the most successful in American history. More specifically, he is an activist investor. This means that he buys his way onto a company board and uses his influence to change the direction of the company. Icahn disagreed with Antioco's ideas. More specifically, he wanted to see Blockbuster sold to a private equity firm. He also thought that Antioco was being overpaid. Icahn got onto Blockbuster's board, along with 2 proxies of his, giving him 3 of the 8 board seats and leading to contentious meetings with Antioco over the direction of Blockbuster. Icahn alleged that Antioco botched an acquisition of Hollywood Video and opposed the shift to an online business model. In late 2006, Icahn picked a fight with Antioco over his corporate bonus. That did it for Antioco, who's out a few months later. Had Antioco stayed, Blockbuster might have been able to pivot. The next CEO, Jim Keyes, couldn't make it work. Icahn would later call Blockbuster his worst investment, citing its changing business model and massive debt load. All of this is related to a more significant challenge that Blockbuster could never address: a rise in competition. We all know about Netflix, but here's the thing. Netflix wasn't the only competition that Blockbuster faced. Another massive rival for Blockbuster? The big box stores, Target, Walmart, Best Buy. They all sold DVDs and they sold them cheap, to the point that customers began to turn to these big box stores to purchase DVDs at a pretty similar price to what they could be rented at from Blockbuster. This price competition was unsustainable for Blockbuster because the big box stores could do something Blockbuster couldn't do: sell DVDs at a loss. It worked for the big box stores because they used them as loss leaders, attracting customers into their stores. Of course, it wasn't just the big box stores. There was also the red box. You remember them? These little kiosks were everywhere, but particularly outside of grocery stores and often in the same vicinity as a Blockbuster. You could use them to rent or buy movies. They had most of the benefits of Blockbuster, but almost none of the overhead, and this gave them a massive competitive advantage over the video giant. The last piece of this? Other video stores. There were independent stores. There were other chains like Hollywood Video. These stores had something Blockbuster often didn't have, particularly when Blockbuster was as big as it would ever get: charm and a personal touch. Stores like Hollywood Video or your local independent store, they couldn't beat Blockbuster or the big box stores on price, but they could get to know you on a personal level, be part of your community, and integrate themselves into your entertainment life. So what did all of this add up to? A failed business model. A model that was too big to pivot. It couldn't win on convenience, price, or charm. All it had was profit. Right? Profit? Well, let's talk about one of the biggest problems that Blockbuster faced: a lack of profitability. That seems bad. First, that's kind of nuts, right? At its peak, Blockbuster had more than 9,000 stores. In 1996, Blockbuster was profitable, and then it wasn't, except for 1 year until its 2010 bankruptcy. It lost more than $4 billion between 2002 and 2006. That is insane. Why the massive profit issues? The debt that we mentioned earlier, that was a big part of the story, but not all of it. Blockbuster also had thousands of stores, including as many as 3,300, with 25,000 employees when the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 2010. That isn't cheap. And that was the number at a low point. At its highest, Blockbuster employed 58,500 people in America and another 25,800 people in other countries. But the real problem wasn't expensive. It was a failure to innovate, and that failure extended well beyond Netflix. Blockbuster was late in developing a fully functional streaming business. In 2007, they launched Blockbuster Total Access, which was a more advanced combination of the mail-in DVDs and store rentals that would give customers a fixed amount of movie rentals every month. It was like a superior version of Netflix. But that wasn't profitable either. In fact, according to a 2020 CNBC article, Blockbuster actually lost $2 for every DVD taken out through its stores on the Total Access plan. Blockbuster rode high when its business model worked, but the company failed to see the trends in the industry that would ultimately kill it. It failed to become a more nimble, more future-oriented business. It failed to be capable of responding to competition. It had competent leadership, but then its own board drove that leadership away. It rested on its laurels, and that proved to be fatal. If you've watched any of the other videos I've made, you've seen it. Failures aren't one set issue. They're systemic. Blockbuster's system failed. They almost became business legends. But almost wasn't enough. And that is it for this business edition of Almost Something. As always, I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to check out our other videos, like, comment, do all that good stuff. But most importantly, I'm going to make this specific ask here. Please subscribe. I really enjoy making these videos, and I want to make sure that I'm making them for an audience that actually likes them. So if you enjoy listening, please click that subscribe button so you know that there is more stuff coming and when it comes. Have a wonderful day out there. And as always, don't let there be any almost in your life.